We are live.
Thank you. I'd like to call Ferrisburg City Council meeting to order tonight, Monday, October 19, 2020, 7 p.m. The Ferrisburg City Council will conduct its business via Zoom to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 under the procedures outlined in the Senate Bill number 1108. Members of the public are welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Members of the public are not required to register or otherwise provide information to attend. Please utilize the mute function on your phone while on the conference call when appropriate. Mayor Hopp will run the virtual meeting like a regular meeting. There will be opportunities at the beginning and at the end of the meeting for public comments. Before moving on to roll call, please, this is for City Council. For each member of the public body attending the meeting remotely, a public announcement at the onset of the meeting by that member to include the meeting minutes. The member is in fact attending the meeting remotely. If the member is attending the meeting remotely for the purpose other than military duty, the member's announcement must further identify specifically the member's physical location by stating the county, the county, the city, township, or village, and state from which he or she is attending the meeting remotely. So with roll call, please include that with your roll call.
Mayor Hopp,
Present. City of Ferrisburg, Ottawa County, State of Michigan.
Councilmember DeWitt,
Present, City of Ferrisburg. I gotta do the Ottawa County, Michigan thing.
Yes.
Okay.
you
consider
just
it done.
did.
Got it.
Councilmember O'Donnell,
Present, City of Ferrisburg, Ottawa County, State of Michigan.
Councilmember Carlson,
Present from the City of Ferrisburg, Ottawa County, Michigan.
Councilmember Blees,
Present, City of Ferrisburg, Ottawa County, Michigan.
Councilmember Montgomery,
You're muted.
Present, and I'm currently in the city of Muskegon, Muskegon County, Michigan.
Councilmember Sias,
Here, City of Ferrisburg, Ottawa County, Michigan.
Okay, thank you. At this time is a moment of silence, remembering the challenges facing many of the residents that are working through all of these challenges during this time. So if you can take a moment of silence to remember them, please. Thank you. And at this time on the agenda is time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
a
nation,
of God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all. Moving down on our agenda for tonight, Item 5, public comments. This time on the agenda is for any citizens to direct brief comments or questions to the City Council. Time for public comments will be given when an agenda item is discussed. If you have a comment or question, please raise your hand to be recognized by the mayor. After being recognized by the mayor, please stand, give your name and address for the record. Proceed with your comment or question. Please limit your comments or questions to 3 minutes. I see no hands raised. So we'll move on to item 6. Consideration approval of consent agenda. A, approve the October 5, 2020 City Council meeting minutes as printed.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Support.
At this time, we will be adding in item 7D. Discussion and take action if appropriate to approve a proposal from Rising Electric for the amount of $821.13 for lighting for the flagpole at City Hall. So there's a motion and support. All those in favor by roll call.
Councilmember Sias,
Yay.
Councilmember Carlson,
Yes.
Councilmember Blees,
Yes.
Councilmember Montgomery,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Donnell,
Yes.
Councilmember DeWitt,
Yes.
Mayor Hop,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. Moving down to 7, new business. A, presentation by Andy Campbell, Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors LLC, Stormwater Assessment Management and Wastewater, the SAW Grant Program. So Mr. Campbell, if you'd like
Yep,
to,
can you hear me okay?
yes, we can. Thank
Okay.
you.
My name is Andy Campbell, Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. We worked with Prine Newhoff on the SAW grant proposal and the look at the stormwater and the sewer systems. We were the financial component of that. So Kevin had given you the presentation on the engineering side, and then we come in and talk about the various finances relating to that as well. And we worked with Craig and Debbie over the past, what's it been, about a year and a half now, actually, that we've worked with them. So appreciate their help. And tonight is kind of giving you a final walkthrough of where everything stands in our discussions with the working group, and then our take on it going forward of our recommendation for the city. The SAW grant, as I'm sure Kevin told you about it, there was 2 components for the city, and tonight we're going to concentrate just on the sewer side, so the actual sanitary sewer side. We did talk about there's another component with the storm water system, and that kind of includes roads and bridges in your case. We'll be talking about that at a later date, but tonight is just going to be on the sanitary sewer side. We actually, just to give you a little bit of background of who we are, if you're not familiar, we worked on the authorities SAW grant proposal back in 2018, and we also worked with the Village of Spring Lake on their proposal as well. We work with about 400 communities in the state of Michigan and a lot of communities in your area. So we're very familiar with the area of Ferrisburg, your size community, and then also the authority system itself with the 5 communities. So very familiar with how everything came down from the authority, and then also with the different member units. I'm going to go ahead, if I can, and share my screen here. Looks like it's disabled. Do you know if somebody can give me access to do that?
Go ahead and try it now, Andy.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right, so on the, we have like a little bit of forward and table contents and a little bit of summary that you can read and we sent over to the city, but I'm gonna get right into the report here and kind of discuss the numbers. As Kevin talked about at the last meeting, and this is a 3-year process to look at the sanitary sewer side. And our work came in 2019 and then predominantly here in 2020 to talk about the sewer fund and where it goes specifically on the rates. I'm going to go through the first few pages pretty quickly. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. But a lot of the information on the first couple of pages is just background work, our due diligence to get up to speed on the system. The overall is that everything is doing very well on the sewer side. There's a couple of things that we have to watch out for that I'll talk about in the cash flow. One being the cost with the authority because of the amount of flow that's going to the authority system and the city is being billed for with the high water table. That is definitely something that we need to keep an eye on over the next couple of years. And I'll tell you where that kind of comes in our analysis. But overall, the sewer is in good shape. And as we worked with this with Craig and Debbie and the working group here, it was very clear. I mean, the major legwork was already fleshed out with the bond issue from Grand Haven Spring Lake in 2018. So with the implementation of the 3 separate rates and adding those to help pay for the authority debt, that was really the major work that needed to be done to get the sewer fund in a good position financially. And then now we're kind of working to keep that in place and keep that strong position going. On the first page, really the one number that we really concentrate on is the cash. And right now, it's actually higher. And I'll talk about what the current number is here in a second. But the cash is in a good position. You can see it's risen significantly over the past 3 years. This is from your audits. And everything is in good shape here on the cash side. The next page in the report talks about your revenues and expenses. And actually, I'm going to wait to talk about that until the cash flow page because there's been some changes in that. And I want to talk about those specific changes here. The the operating expense side. So this page goes over your actual budgets. So 18, 19, 20 actuals, and then your 21 budget. You'll notice that in our report, we talk about this stuff later, but the debt side comes into our reports later on. It's not that we take it out of the reports, it's just in a different format and later in the report. But the overall operating expenses, I want to concentrate on this line item right here, if you can all see that, and that is the treatment charge to the authority. One of the things that we talked about in the working group that's obviously been on Craig and Debbie's radar, they're well aware of it and pointed it out to me as well, is that the flow to the authority has gone up significantly in the past couple of years. Not unlike Village of Spring Lake that we worked with last year. They were in the same situation, that this high water table is causing a major spike in the amount of flow that goes to the authority. If you're not aware, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but you are charged based on the amount of gallons that you send to the authority. So if you can get that flow down, theoretically your costs will go down as well, even though the costs are distributed between the different member authorities. If you, the city, can improve on the amount of flow that you're sending and everybody else remains the same, then your costs will go down. If everybody rises because of the high water table, then theoretically, if you lower it and everybody else lowers it, you might not see that big of a decrease. But one of the things that you'll see in the Village of Spring Lake is in the same case is that your system does have a pretty high amount of I&I component in this, you can tell from the numbers. With the high water table being up and the city's actual ratepayer base not growing that significantly, you can tell that this amount of expense basically doubling in 2 years is from inflow and infiltration in the system. So stormwater, rainwater, essentially getting into your pipes one way or another, whether it's through rain gutters that are tied to the system, sump pumps that are tied to the system, actual pipes that go into the sanitary sewer. And what most of it, and Kevin I saw is on the call, he can walk you through way better than I can, being a financial advisor. But there's also a component, if your pipes are old and cracked or there's holes in them or something, then rainwater finds a way and goes to the authority. So that is something we got to keep an eye on. And I know Kevin and his team from Pride and Newhoff are targeting to work with the city to try and tighten up the system on that, to try to get the amount of inflow and infiltration down, so that you don't get billed as much as you are right now. Because right now, if we were to do this study in 2018, you can see, I mean, everything's pretty normal. If you looked at 17 and 16, everything was pretty normal. Everything's in good shape. You're getting charged $130,000 from the authority. And then all of a sudden the high water table comes into play, and now your costs have doubled over 2 years with the authority. So it's something we got to keep an eye on. In our test year, what we did, the test year is basically a normalized year of budget expenses. We kept that the same as your 2020 budget. What we talked about with Craig and Debbie, and this is something, obviously, this is just a snapshot in time. I hope that, and I know Craig and Debbie have more than enough experience than to update this and take a look at this and keep track of this. But over the next couple of years, we need to make sure to keep an eye on that, because our assumption right now is that we're hoping that this is going to plateau now. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. Hopefully we are at the point where the high water table has reached the limit and the amount of I&I getting in the system has plateaued. That is our hope in this study, that, and you'll see that play out in the numbers, that this is not going to get worse, because it has doubled over the past 2 years. But we did take that into account in the study. So it's not that we are shortchanging it from the amount that you experienced in 2020 versus the amount that we are assuming going forward is level. And again, we're hoping that that is a solid number to forecast going forward. On the debt side, so if you're all familiar, you have your debt is with the authority. You don't have any on the sewer side. You don't have any city issued debt that's payable out of the sewer fund. The authority debt, there's a couple different ways that they have done it. This one, which is the lift station portion of the 2018 bonds, is your actual contractual debt to the authority that is set. So this issue itself, you know exactly what you're going to be paying. This is down to the penny. This is what you're going to be paying every single year. So in the next fiscal year, when you're doing your budget, you know that you're going to pay $80,348.21 to the authority for this portion of the debt issue. You also have other debt issues with the authority that are based on flow. And those two debt issues, can jump to the cash flow here, come into play. Right down here, you have two debt issues from the 2013 bonds and the 2018 force main part of the bonds that are based on flow. So this is something to keep in mind. And this is why Kevin and his team are definitely at target trying to get inflow and infiltration out of the system. Not only are you charged on the operating side when you send gallons of sewage, whether it's actual sewage or rainwater, to the authority, but your debt payments on two of those debt payments are actually based on that as well. So if you can get that rainwater out of the system, you're going to be benefited greatly, assuming everybody else stays the same, not only on the operating side, but also on the debt side. So when you look at the overall cost of the system and you see, okay, we have $260,000 of our $565,000 operating budget goes to the authority for treatment charges. That's roughly, what's that, like 45%, somewhere around there. You also have $118,000 that's payable in debt based on flow. So again, you're seeing over 50% of your total system costs minus capital that are based on flow to the authority. So that is the key number when we looked at this study that you need to keep in mind going forward, that the better you can do to get that down, the less operating expenses, the less debt payments, the more that you're going to be able to keep in reserve for your improvements to your collection system. the city itself is still responsible for the collection system, which is all the pipes that get it to the authority. So that was the major study on Kevin and his team's side, was the collection system itself. And keeping that in mind, I mean, that's what the overall recommendation is that you guys got to try to work with Kevin to get that down as much as possible. If I were in your position and this was me, and I mean, we see this with a lot of supplier systems in Michigan. We work with a lot of communities that are on their own systems, that are doing their own plants and their own lagoons. And then we work with a lot of communities that are on supplier systems, like the ones that are on the city of Kalamazoo system or Muskegon County system, or the Lansing system. There's a lot of those systems in the state that are big conglomerates of communities, and one of the overall conclusions for these communities in the state is that there's a lot of I&I in our systems in Michigan, and if we can get that down, we can lower our expenses. So I know Kevin's going to be following up on that. That's really my overall major talking point. Obviously, I've said it a few times here, is that that's really what I want the city to come out of this, is to realize that, and that try to get that number down, if at all possible. Let's talk about the overall cash flow. Again, the city's in actually really good shape in the sewer fund side. If you recall, I actually, as of 2019, let me go back up here real quick, your cash has gone up significantly over the past few years, and you'll see that in the basis of our starting rate study, the start of this fiscal year, you had just shy of $700,000. So again, that cash balance continues to rise every year, and that's a good thing right now, because it was pretty low, relatively speaking, and you can see in the out years, we'll talk about that in a second, of where your cash is going to go. But you are in a good starting position of just under $700,000 at the start of this fiscal year. And everything seems to be going well now that you've implemented the rates needed to pay for the debt on the authority side. In this fiscal year, one of the numbers that we kind of key in on is what we call the typical homeowner in their quarterly bill, in your case, monthly or quarterly. In your case, it's quarterly. On a typical homeowner, we use an assumption that's used by USDA, Eagle for all their calculations. We assume 51 cubic meters per quarter, which is about 13,500 gallons, if you're more used to gallons. And that typical homeowner pays $146.65 per quarter for the total sewer bill. This does not include water, just the sewer side of the bill. Overall, I know that we talked about this in the working group. We got medium rates. It's not that you have high rates. I mean, relatively speaking, again, we can solve a lot of communities in the state. I know that there, in the discussions that we had in the working group, the feeling was that, hey, we've got really high rates. We need to figure out how we can do something about that. What about the tax side on storm and roads and bridges? That we'll talk about that later. But relatively speaking, on the sewer side, you don't have really high rates. We see rates that are much higher than this. One of the problems that you could be running into, though, is that you're on a system with 4 other communities, and they may have lower rates than you because of the way their systems have developed. But overall, being that you're less than $50 a month is not something that we see as really high in terms of the statewide sewer rate. You're in the medium range. Our typical metric for the medium range, and this is just something that we've established over the years of doing this, is $35 to $55 per month, or $105 to $165 per quarter is the medium range. You're pretty much right in the middle high of the medium range for what we typically see on the sewer rate side. That changed a lot in 2018 with the debt. Before that, we were obviously a lot lower, but with the debt, the implementation of rates to pay for the authority debt, rates did go up, but still medium range. Everything's doing well on that. In my opinion, you guys are doing everything you need to do to keep the fund in acceptable ranges across the board. For this year, I just want to run down some of these numbers to show you where everything stands. So the 2020-21 revenues, we expect to bring in just shy of $800,000. That is from all the rates that customers see on their bill, and then we also have some other revenue like interest and penalties. So, your operating expenses are $565,000, which brings in a net operating revenue of $220,000. And then we tackle the debt and the other debt that's based on this one's based on the actual contracted amount. These ones are based on the flow, and then also the capital improvement that you're targeting with Prine and Newhoff and their team and just overall. Overall, I mean, this year we expect with one of the projects that you're doing that you will use some of your cash reserves, but in a relatively neutral year, you are adding just a little bit every single year to that cash reserve. You can see that we have a small increase that we'll talk about in a second, but barring any capital improvements, so 2021, 22, no capital improvements as you can see here, you have a relative, like just above zero cash flow. You're adding a little bit every year. So what that tells me is that you've done the increases needed. You're cash flowing the system correctly. Everything's being paid for on the debt side. It's just that we got to talk about capital improvements now. So Kevin and his team worked on the capital side, which I know I talked about in the previous meeting with you about. Our recommendation after working with the working group and talking about, hey, we did the big rate increase in 2018. We want to keep rates as low as possible, but we know we got to pay for the system. There's capital improvements coming up. What can we do to keep rates low, but also fund the system in the manner that we need to? And so we talked about doing just in our opinion, what's a relatively low inflationary increase per year to cover that. So from what we're seeing on the system, no big rate increases needed. We're just saying, hey, we need to keep up with inflationary expenses. Expenses go up typically every year. We've got capital improvements to pay for. We're recommending a 2% increase to the minimum charge and the commodity charge yearly. We're assuming that you will keep the debt charges steady, so no increases to those, because those are, as long as your flow and what you need to bring in to pay for the debt on the flow side is relatively neutral, then you should be able to keep those debt charges neutral as well. So with that in mind, your typical homeowner will see about a 1.5% increase to their sewer bill overall. So the 2% increase to the two rates, holding the debt charges steady, brings an overall bill increase on the sewer side to the typical homeowner of about 1.5%. Overall, I mean, obviously, this is just typical homeowner I'm talking about. Obviously, there's customers that are going to use way more water and less sewer. There's customers that are going to use less. But we use a typical homeowner as a metric to kind of gauge where a typical homeowner in the city of Perrysburg is going to fall with this type of cash flow claim. And in my eyes, again, a lot of the legwork was done in 2018 with the issuance of the debt with the authority and subsequent the city taking the action to instill the debt charges on the bills. But to me, that's a win. I mean, there are a lot of communities in the state that did saw asset management program and are finding out that there's a lot of problems in the system and they had to do a big rate increase. We've had many that are in the 20, 30, 40% range because they realize that this stuff is deteriorating and we got to pay for this and we didn't know about it. The good thing is that that's not the case with your system. There's capital improvements coming up, and Kevin had talked about, hey, these are the projects that we're thinking that we need to tackle in the next few years. But from what we're seeing is that you can do that with a relatively low inflationary increase and take care of that. So nothing really wild that's out there that we're expecting to issue $10 million of debt next year or something, but just slow and steady from what we can see on the sewer side will get the needs accomplished. On the capital improvements, this right here, so all the orange boxes is the Bryony Newhoff plan that Kevin talked about and all the capital side. So if you look at his report, you'll see the matching numbers come in, but over the next couple of years, you'll see there's a couple of projects around $100,000 or so. After next fiscal year, we got 4 projects every single year, or 4 totals. They might be a couple of projects in each total there, but overall, again, not something that's a really heavy investment coming up that we're seeing that Kevin and his team are seeing on the engineering side. But we are anticipating that we are going to use a little bit of the cash to fund those projects. So one of the things that we talked about in the working group is that in the next 4 years, we want to tackle relatively after, again, I keep talking next 4 years, after next fiscal year, the following 4 years, we want to tackle projects with around $100,000 per year. You could raise the rates to cover that if you wanted to. You could say, hey, we don't want to run the cash down. Let's raise the rates to cover it and try to run cash flow neutral or cash flow positive every year. That's fine too. That's different. That's just a different way of approaching it. What we talked about in the meeting was, hey, we've got a little bit of cash built up. Yeah, it's not a whole lot for the sewer system, but we are on a supplier system, meaning that you don't have to maintain a plant. You're not worried that hopefully that something major at the plant happens. You're not on the hook for that yourself. You are on the hook as the authority as a whole, but there's a little bit more stability being on a supplier system, so we can maybe run the cash down and not have to raise rates up as much as we would to cover those without dipping into the cash reserves. So we talked about a couple of different scenarios, and we settled on, hey, let's just do 2% per year. Let's do something, get inflationary increases, get a little bit more revenue to keep up with expenses, keep up as much as we can with these capital improvements, but try to keep rates as low as possible for the user. So that's what we're looking at over the next few years, is to maintain 2% per year on those 2 rates. Again, about 1.5% overall bill increase to the homeowner. Use a little bit of the cash reserves to pay for some of those capital improvements, but also keep it to a relatively stable balance overall in case we have something unexpected come up. So with that, I mean, that's you'll see that it goes on another 10 years. This is a 20-year analysis. So if you're interested, you can see the full 20 years. And just as we talked about, I mean, it gets a little bit cloudier when you get into years 11 through 20. I mean, it's a little bit cloudy after you get through the first 5 years too, but you can see that we did anticipate some capital improvements in years 11 through 20. We also anticipated, I mean, it goes down to 1% actually per year at that time. You can keep it at 2 if you want, or somewhere around there. But relatively speaking, I mean, that over the next 20 years, Kevin and his team didn't see anything major coming up that you couldn't tackle with cash and just some inflationary increases. So let me pause there. Any questions, comments?
Does council have any questions for Mr. Campbell at this time?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
How much of that increase in the water flow is from some pumps illegally pumping into our water system? We know that's happened. We've made the decision in the past to kind of ignore the situation because as soon as we disconnect them, they reconnect them anyway. So is there any projection as to how much additional water we're putting into the sewer from the sump pumps as opposed to the actual system leakage?
I'm going to put Kevin on the spot here if he's still on. Kevin, did you guys have that analysis?
I don't think we've gone into that specifically, but I would say from the condition assessment of the pipes, we're seeing those are in pretty good shape. So I think that you're going to find that a large percentage of that flow is from sump pumps or footing drains or some other infrastructure besides your actual pipes that's within the right of way.
As I recall, the last camera shootings we've had, our system is in relatively good shape with a few exceptions of leakage. So I got to assume that the most of the increase is from the sump pumps. Therefore, it would be in our best interest to raise the rates to recover. As I'm looking here at page 3, our net operating loss is $109,000. We're treating groundwater. We're paying to treat groundwater that it doesn't seem like the city can put a stop to. Would it be in our best interest to raise the rates to cover the additional groundwater we're putting into the system before it gets out of hand? If the water stays up, it's going to continue. I guess my position would be that we should increase the rates to mitigate that added expense.
So I'll give you my input here. Hopefully, what we talked about is that's going to plateau. Obviously, I can't see in the future, and just by the relative area that you're in, I'm hoping that it's going to plateau. We've had other customers that are on the west side of the state, same situation. We're seeing some plateau on their side as well. So I really don't know if the authority flows, like I honestly don't have them in front of me for like the past couple months, if that is the case or not. But we did take into account the high side in our study of what was the 2000 flow. Again, that was 100% increase over the last 2 years. We did take that into account in our study, and that is included in the 2% increase. So you don't need to do something outside of that in our eyes. I get what you're saying. It's a tough situation, but there's also, it's basically you got to weigh your options. Is it worth it to raise rates on something that is hopefully an anomaly in the some part, maybe not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year anomaly, but hopefully it's going to go down in the next couple of years? Or should you, as you said, raise your rates higher to cover that for now and then look at it in 2 or 3 years and figure out what you want to do at that time? It just depends on what your philosophy is in terms of where that expense is going to go in the future and how conservative you want to be in terms of rates and cash.
But thank you for the clarification. So that 2% you did take into effect that 260,000.
Correct.
That rate, correct? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we are seeing, I live on Spring Lake, and we are seeing definite decrease in water, not at all down to like what we were in 2008, but it's not going higher like what we had experienced last November and December, and then again in May. So you're saying that you're drawing the conclusion that this large influx is based off from the sump pumps and footing drains? Is that what the assumption
I'll put
is?
that on Kevin.
Okay.
I don't know the engineering aspects. Kevin, you want to?
Yeah, that is what we're looking at. And there may be some other areas where there's possible inflow and infiltration, and through smoke testing and that, we've provided that information to the city, and I think Matt Schindlebeck's tackling some of those areas, and we'll, once we get those all out of the way, that'll even solidify more on where the additional flow is coming from.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any additional comments or questions from council at this time from Mr. Campbell?
I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'm not a plumber, but it was always my assumption that some pumps pump the waste into the wastewater or into our drainage system, right? Into the wastewater. It doesn't go into a drain field or field, does it? I mean, so every time a sump pumps run in, it's pumping water into our sewage, correct? Or are sump pumps supposed to be separate from our sewage and draining into fields, drain fields? I just want to know why sub pumps are making such an impact on our sewage rates.
The sump pumps typically should be designed to go into a storm system or into a backyard where they can dissipate, because it's not anything that needs to be treated at the wastewater treatment plant. So you may have where you have footing drains that go into a sump pump, and then that's tied into the sewer. Those are the things that you're trying to avoid. Or you may have, roof drains that go into a crock in the basement and then they get pumped out. So any of that water that's not from your wash water or from your toilet, that's what you're trying to get rid of and get it out into an area that's not going into the sanitary sewer.
And if I can add to that real quick on the finance side, so this is not just a shoreline community issue in the state. We have clients all over in the middle of the state where you don't see a river or anything around that had this same issue. There were, back in the day, and Kevin can speak to this too, I'm sure, is that there were a lot of systems in Michigan that were built so that the sump pumps were also put into the sanitary sewer system. Just happened to be like, hey, instead of building two pipes, instead of building one storm water pipe and one sanitary sewer pipe, and also having a water line too, so you could have 3 pipes down the same road. Let's just build one sanitary sewer line. They can put their rainwater, the sanitary sewer, all that goes into one pipe and goes out to the plant. We're not too concerned about it. A lot of times that happened because the cost to treat were very low compared to the cost to put in a second pipe. So there were a lot of systems in Michigan that were built like that. Just basically, it was a finance decision at that time. Hey, does it make more sense to build 2 pipes? Or should we just build 1 pipe, send it all to the plant? Yeah, as long as the plant can take it, they can treat it, that's fine. What communities are finding now is that a lot of that time, the roles have now reversed in a lot of cases, and that it is now becoming more expensive to treat that because of the amount of flow that's going in, just because of the amount of rain that we're getting or the high water table. Also, like there are communities in the state where they're getting pinged by Eagle because they're now reaching over their demand capacity of the system because of the amount of water that's coming into rain events. So now they're talking about we might have to do a plant addition to take on rainwater treatment. I mean, you're getting into these situations a lot in Michigan. This is not something untypical that we see all over the state. The hard part about this, and what you're going to run into in our eyes from a financial perspective, is that the ones in our eyes, from, again, this is my perspective, my opinion. You got to talk to Kevin, work with your community on what your action item is, and obviously run this all through legal. But from our perspective, you start at the lowest hanging fruit. What subdivisions in your area have stormwater? If you have a stormwater pipe available for a subdivision or downtown or something, you need to make sure, excuse me, I'm running a little bit of a cold here. You need to make sure that you have all those customers hooked to the stormwater. So all their sump pumps, their footing drains, everything is hooked to the stormwater pipe. It could be as simple as when the home was built, it was hooked to the sanitary sewer line and no one ever knew the difference. Or it could be as simple as the plumber bore a hole in the ground and whatever pipe he hit first, that's what it happens to be in. So making sure that those customers that have a storm sewer access, a rainwater pipe access, are hooked into those pipes, that's your biggest target, is to get those ones out of the way. The ones that do not have access, so if they're currently, their storm footing drains, their sump pumps are currently hooked to a sanitary sewer line and it's going to the plant, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to unwind that unless you build them a new pipe. It's just a matter of fact. Because what you're going to have to tell these people is, hey, you can't be in, legally speaking, you have the authority to say you cannot be hooked into our sanitary sewer. But if you don't have another pipe to send it to, are you going to tell them, hey, yeah, you got to put it in your backyard? And your neighbor's also gonna be doing that. And so is their neighbor and their neighbor. And all of a sudden you're gonna have a big pond in your backyards. It's just a very difficult discussion for cities that are built in close quarters to not give somebody another option to get rid of the water and get it off their lawn. Most likely what's gonna happen is that they're going to unhook it if you tell them to, and then they're gonna rehook it up after you leave. Because no one wants to put that water in their backyard and flood their property. So in our eyes, from a financial perspective, target the lowest hanging fruit. The ones that have a stormwater system in their neighborhood, do everything you can, surveys, volunteer, whatever is a financial way to do it that is not too costly to try to get them hooked, make sure they're hooked on the right place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions or comments from others that have not spoken yet?
Your Honor.
Yes.
My understanding is with the, do we have a combined sewer overflow in the city of Ferrisburg? Is our stormwater and our sewer combined?
No, they are not.
They're not, okay. One of the things, problems I have with the increases, right now, we're looking at a historically high water tables. And what about the years where we don't have, where it gets low, where we're not gonna have very much flow in there? If we increase now, the fine or the a fee to cover the cost, are we going to be able to reduce it or make allowances for the future to reduce the cost?
That is a good question. I will tell you in the next 5 years, no. So what you will see is if in the next 5 years, let's say you do the 2% increases, and we're sitting here in 2025 and saying, hey, let's reassess and figure out where we stand. And this cost that we anticipated to be $260,000 for treatment charge from the authority is now back to $130,000. And the debt that's also based on flow. So these numbers, let's say, I don't know if it's specifically, if you cut your flow in half, it's cut. I don't think it's that easy on the debt side, but let's say you save 30,000 on the debt. Now you're saving 160,000 total. So on the budget side, you went down 130 on the operating, and on the debt, I'm just making a number up and saying you save 30,000 on the debt payment. Adding $160,000 is not going to be the difference for your community, in my opinion, of whether or not you have done the wrong thing by raising rates. You have capital improvements coming up every single year in years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and obviously 11 through 20, same thing. They're $100,000 here, 150, 50,000, 200,000. If in the next 5 years, if you do 2% increases, as long as the plant expenses don't go up, you're not going to overshoot it. There's going to be capital improvements you're going to need to do that, hey, if you save some money on the plant costs, we'll just be able to do capital improvements a little bit easier with our cash reserves. That's what the end goal is going to be. You're not going to be able to lower rates. Really, the rate discussion, until the debt falls off, there's not going to be a chance, in my opinion, to lower rates. You've got significant debt until 2038. So that's really the question. But obviously, you need to do some analysis every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, every year with your budget, whatever it may be. But raising the rates by 2% over the next couple of years, even if the plant expenses go down, it's not going to change the overall that it wasn't needed or anything. There will be capital improvements that can use that money.
Thank you.
Okay, then a follow-up question on that. It looks like we are sitting pretty good with the current ones that we have. If we stayed at our current level, would we be able to I know we'd have a significant decrease in our reserve funds, but can we absorb it for the next couple of years and see if there is a decrease? Look at it perhaps in another 3 years.
So, this is not a situation where you have a fatal flaw in my eyes. So like I talked about, the communities that we work with on SAW that had to do a 20, 30, 40% increase. Those ones, in those situations, I would say, yeah, you got to do it. Like there's nothing, you can't not do this. We're in a terrible situation. We got to do the increase. If you said, hey, I don't want to do the 2% increase next year, let's delay it a year or whatever, delay it 2 years, whatever, until we figure out the operating side and where the water table is going and the flows. It's not going to be a fatal flaw. You can see that raises your revenues about $12,000. So a 2% increase is going to bring in an extra $12,000 per year. So if you don't do the increase, it's not like everything is going to implode and you're not going to have a good plan. It's just that, in our opinion, inflationary increases keep communities out of trouble. The main conclusion that we've gotten on the finance side on all these SAW grant programs, we've done about 140 of them. Inflationary increases is the way to go. Getting customers used to inflationary increases, whether it's 1%, 2%, 3% per year, to cover those expenses, the increase, the normal increase in operating, the increases that are going to come from your authority, they're not going to hold steady, I'm assuming, just in terms of their operating expenses outside of the flow that you're sending them, but just in their overall cost to run the authority. Getting used to that type of environment for customers is key to avoiding bigger increases down the line. You could be put in a position, if you hold off for 2 or 3 years and if the expenses don't go down, you could be put in a position where you might have to do a 10% rate increase to keep up. So it really comes down to a policy decision. No, you're not going to run the fund into the ground if you don't do the 2% increase next year. But it also is going to get customers used to that everybody's used to their cable bill, phone bill, every expense usually goes up every year. Getting used to that on the sewer side as well will help the fund tremendously in terms of paying for capital, and also give you a little buffer in terms of operating fluctuations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, thank you very much for this information. Definitely something that we definitely have to take into consideration moving forward. And I appreciate your presentation. So
Yep.
at this time, will it be, is Kevin going to be speaking now, Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Okay.
Craig, can I get control of the?
You should have it.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
While he's preparing this, my hope is that council members had an opportunity to review the information that Mr. Bessinger sent to us earlier regarding Kevin's presentation.
There you go.
All right. Can see it now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. I first wanted to thank Andy for jumping in on things, and he kind of went over the capital improvement side of things, and I wanted to kind of jump back to how we got here, give some summary of the asset management and the SAW grant. That was, we applied for a grant with the city back in early 2013, and the city was selected as a 5th round recipient, and the SAW grant reviews the stormwater and the sanitary sewer system. And now let's give you a little background going into the asset management. In order to get to a point where we can take a look at the costs that Andy went over, we go through an asset management process that is based on the inventory, the data, the total ownership system cost over time, and being able to manage the rates. And through that, the items that we went through was going through an inventory, condition assessment, failure risk, a consequence, determining criticality, level of service, and creating an asset management plan, which we've been in the works of reviewing with Craig and Debbie and Matt Schimmelbeck. And then finally, the main emphasis on that is the rate management plan. The first thing that we had to do was go through and inventory everything in the sanitary and on the storm side, collect all the data, determine how many manholes there were, how many catch basins, and map everything. And part of that was the inventory. This kind of just gives an example. Craig, when you're seeing my screen, are you just seeing the one?
Yeah,
one that,
just part of it.
just one of it? Okay.
Well, we're seeing your notes on the next page, or the next page coming up.
Right here where my cursor is?
We see that, but it only takes half the screen.
Okay. All right, we'll keep going. If that's all right, I'll keep going in that manner.
That's fine.
So we went through, inventoried everything, determined all the manholes, all the sanitary, all the catch basins that were part of the system, and went over mapping and all that with Matt to come up with kind of here's an update of the SAW project as far as kind of giving an inventory overview, 17.7 miles of gravity sewer, 1.6 miles of force main, 6 pump stations, over 400 manholes. And on the storm side of things, there's 10 miles of storm sewer, 460 catch basins, and 124 manholes. So as you know, Tim asked about rates and how to maintain things. These are, we got eyes on the majority of this stuff, but you also have over 17 miles of sanitary sewer that needs to be maintained, and pump stations and manholes. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's under the ground that's, not getting any newer. As we did we had
Kevin?
plumbers in, and that was, yes.
You were cutting out. Could you just repeat your last couple of sentences, please?
I just went over kind of the summary of the amount of sanitary and gravity sewer, and just kind of summarize how much piping is in the ground that needs to be maintained, and that we had plumbers on site. They did a majority of the condition assessments for that with inline televising. We also did put meters in place. We're finalizing reports on that, which kind of will give us an idea of to concentrate on areas where we are seeing higher inflow and infiltration. So different maps on that, and areas, as Andy mentioned, the low hanging fruit, that we can concentrate on some of those areas that do have storm sewer. And we also did inventory and condition on the assessment on the pump stations, with the majority of those were just upgraded. And we did smoke testing. Here's a kind of summary of the sanitary sewer. You have these in your packet. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on those, but 60,000 feet of 8-inch pipe with the number of manholes on that and the different pipe materials. Similar on the storm side of things. The mapping that we had initially, a lot of it was in George Dunning's head, and some passed on to Matt. So I think now we have a good mapping system that's in place with the GIS. This kind of just gives you an overall background of the piping that's in place. So that's all at Matt's fingertips now. He has new equipment in place to do that, to be able to look information up. So that was the first step, was the inventory. Then we went into assessing the condition. We talked about, you probably saw plumbers on site in areas. We also did zoom camera on areas that were the pipe that was newer than 1993, to look down those and to establish a condition assessment, and went through a 1 through 5 rating, with 1 being good and 5 failed, and did a risk failure, because this is what we're trying to avoid, is a catastrophe on pipe. And if we see any issues like that, and Matt has gone through and fixed a few storm situations that we said, hey, we better get onto this. And I think they also did a couple sanitary reviews. And from that, we can map that all out. Plumbers' videos are uploaded into the GIS, and so they're linked to each pipe, so they can be looked at in the future. If there's consideration of, hey, let's see what this pipe looks like in 3-4 years, we can see if it deteriorates or stays the same. So a lot of good information for that. And as part of the condition assessment, this was, you may have seen crews out smoke testing. Here's an example of smoke coming through a manhole in a front yard. Different types being mapped out with roof drains, cleanouts, smoke in the building, or a storm connection. And those are all provided on a map and in a report that Matt has. Here's a couple other examples of smoke testing. This is a zoom camera video where we put it down in one of the new pipes, and just to get an idea what the first 30-40 feet look like in a pipe, just to get a good feel for what the remainder is. Here's an example of the televising that was done, and a summary of the smoke testing. Here's a map that Matt has been now provided. And so when we talk about infiltration, one of these here is a roof drain that needs to be fixed. So that's the low hanging fruit, that if there's roof drain that's going into the sanitary, that can be fixed quite easily, and get the biggest bang for your buck on those. But you're not seeing a whole bunch of those either in there. But there's like some manhole castings, some have the wrong covers, have storm clean out or storm covers on them with holes in them. So if those are in low areas, those can be fixed to account for some of that infiltration. Some more examples of the condition assessments with the pipes linked to the GIS. There's an example of a cracked pipe, and that's tied right into the GIS. So I wanted to kind of go over, this is the City of Ferrysburg, the sanitary sewer condition assessments, the risk of failure that we've established. Looking at the blues are the good colors that you want to see on these. So looking at manholes, gravity sewers, grinder stations, pump stations, those are the majority, those are in good shape. The force mains, those are based mainly on age, with the sanitary system installed back in the late 70s, early 80s. Those are more difficult to assess because they're always have flow in them and underwater. So we did an age assessment on those, but typical lifespan of 75 years, they're about halfway through their anticipated life. So overall, as we mentioned, pretty good situation with the sanitary. And this is the storm. You'll see a little more concerns in the storm area with some more reds and oranges and yellows in there. So definitely an older system in the storm side of things, but those repairs typically can be done with streets improvements and are less costly than the sanitary, which is usually typically deeper system to repair. Also, as we went through, we also did a review of the road system. And on this, the MDOT and the state PASER ratings, they're called, they use a rating that actually is a different scale. A 1 is a failed and goes to a 10. And you can see that the road side of things is an area of concern with the city, with almost, I would say, just over 50% of those in the failed to fair poor condition assessments that were done. And then that we were able to map that to show those ratings on those. So from these, now we can start making defined and decisions based on, hey, we have a sanitary that may have an issue here on 168th, and we have a road that's in poor condition, and we have some storm issues. And when these are all overlaid, that's how we produce our capital improvement plan, and went through those with Matt and Debbie and Craig. Just a few examples of some of the criticalities, just examples for that. I'll skip through those. Established a map of the criticality of the system, where where the risk of failure and the consequence of failure, like on these larger, North Shore, 178, the main streets, 3rd Street, and that's where your biggest traffic is, and you'd have the most issues if you had any problems. So we factor that into our discussions in our mapping too. And then we kind of go through and look at what kind of level of service we anticipate. As most communities, they don't want to get to the point where they have, flooded basements, and that they are definitely more proactive and looking to replace the improvement side of things. So with the sounds like I may be running into some internet connections. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Asset management plan, we put together a report for that along with a sanitary capacity analysis. And you'll have those as deliverables, the financial rate management plan. Andy has prepared that, and then also the smoke testing report has already been delivered to Matt, and he's working his way through some of those items. So with all that information that we've gathered, we went through and completed a capital improvement plan. We went through this with Matt and Craig and Debbie and adjusted some projects based on budgets and that. And here on the left is kind of an example of where the different categories are for the funding side of things. The blue is the sanitary sewer. Andy mentioned, different projects in 2021, 22, and down the road. A little higher in the storm, which is green. The red is water, and the streets are the purple. So you can see the biggest challenge that is faced is some of the street repair costs in the future of maintaining those to get those into those levels of higher categories than the poor and the failed that they are in now. So just some background information there to allow the council to make some informed decisions. So, a couple overall notes on the SAW grant, some of the information. Matt and his crew have some new tablets that they have that'll assist with their MISDIG work. The mapping will all be on those computers. Scanned all the files and all the record plans that were in his office, have those on the computer, so they'll be able to pull those up in the field. That's an added asset. Some equipment with handheld GPS equipment that they can now pick up information such as curb stops and that on the water side of things, and other entities to get those into maps so they have them in one central location. As Andy indicated with the budget and that, you also want to keep the asset management plan updated as things develop and our different systems are cleaned and all that. That information can be added. The GIS that's now in place are excellent place for adding information that the city has, and examples there with trees and signs and everything, different streetlights and stuff that you have to maintain that you may not even have an idea, do we have 20 park benches that we need to have, maintain or budget for, or, different streetlights within the city. So definitely good aspects and information that can be used for those. So I ran through that quick. I know everybody had the packet there, and Andy did a nice job kind of summarizing things with the budget side of things. So we'll be preparing with the SAW grant runs through the end of December. So we're working on finalizing some of the deliverables in there. As I mentioned, the I&I study and some of the condition assessment information will all be deliverables that'll be provided, and new maps and that for City Hall and for Matt's office, those, so he can use those for his crews for assigning work orders and that. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Do any of the council members have any questions for Mr. Keefe? I want to thank you very much for this presentation. Definitely was a lot of information to share with us.
Yeah.
And that definitely was, but I think it's very critical as we're moving forward with technology to be able to utilize it to its fullest capacity and to provide our DPW department with the needed assets also. But thank you. Any other questions from anyone? Comments before we move forward?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward to our line item 7B. This is an introduction of ordinance 315, an ordinance to allow accessory buildings on vacant parcels subject to certain regulations of RG 1 ILO, the zone district. No need for a motion, it's just for a discussion. Does anyone have any discussions or questions at this time regarding this ordinance?
Your Honor.
Yes.
I have a question for Craig. As I'm reading this, like on over where Rebecca lives, over in that area, in the inland overlay district, where you have a lot on the water and you want to put an accessory building on the other side of the street. As I'm reading this, that has to be deeded as one parcel then, correct? Or not correct?
It can be two separate parcels, but it has to have a restricted covenant on the parcel that has the accessory building on it. So it's always tied to, the accessory building is always tied to the property owner that has the house. The thought was that we don't want to have an accessory building on one parcel that gets sold to a different party down the road and it gets used for storage or something else instead of the intended use of being an accessory building for the house.
So what you're saying is you could put an accessory building on a piece of property you own across the street, but not the one next to it. It has to have a covenant that it is sold with the house on the water. Is I'm understanding this correctly?
Correct. So there's two parcels, one with a house on it and a vacant across the street. If you put accessory building on the vacant parcel, we have to have a restricted covenant that's recorded saying that those two parcels are always going to be tied together.
So you can't sell one or the other. You got to sell both together.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all only question I had on that.
Which is a common occurrence along in this area.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of them along Cecilia there and Virginia.
Yes. Okay. Any further discussion regarding this ordinance? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to 7C. Discussion, take action if appropriate to approve the proposal from Muskegon Awning and Fabrication for blank amount to install flagpole at City Hall. And that information was provided in our packet. There was 2 quotes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move that we approve the proposal from Muskegon Awning and Fabrication for $6,848 to install a flagpole at Perrysburg City Hall.
Okay, is there support?
I support that, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Your Honor.
Certainly.
For Craig. Craig, does this fit in with the master plan that we just came up with for Ferrisburg City Hall?
So the master plan that we just looked at does not show really any changes to the butterfly garden area.
Okay.
Any other additional questions or comments regarding this item? Yes.
A question. Yeah, I know one's a 25-foot flagpole, one's a 30-foot flagpole. And it looks like there's a price difference of $2,600. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, is the 30-foot a lot? Well, it's going to be a lot better, but is it going to be better for the residents to see it and we get a larger flag? I mean, what benefit does the larger flagpole have for the city?
Your Honor.
Yes.
All right. The reason that I moved to go with the 30-foot flag is one that is a bigger flagpole. It doesn't match the one already in existence on the other side of the building, and it is more structurally. It's stronger than the other one. It's thicker metal, and able to withstand winds, higher forces wind. Nothing hopefully we will ever see in this area, but I always like the bigger the flag, the better for my preference.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions?
Your Honor.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with Scott on this. I don't see $2,600 worth of value in going with a 5-foot higher pole. I just don't see it.
Okay. Mr. Bezinger, you're going to add something?
Just wanted to ask on location, and anybody had any concerns or suggestions on location? Proposed on the left side of the building.
I would support the position that staff has decided upon. Any other comments on the placement of the flagpole?
Yeah, I would support that location as well. I would be hesitant to support other locations that didn't fit with our master plan that we will be bringing to council next month.
Okay. So there's,
I support it.
okay. There's a motion and support. So without any further questions, we'll do a roll call, please, on this motion. And this would be for the $6,848 for the 30-foot pole, including a 6x10 nylon American flag.
Your Honor, is the current one 30-foot?
In the front yard or the
Yes.
north side? I
Yes.
think that's a 25-footer. This one's going to be a little taller and a little thicker. And the thought would be that we would remove the one on the north side of the building, since we'll have the main flag on the south side.
This might be a silly question, but we're not able to move that one.
At one time, a few years back, we looked at, there was going to be a flagpole donated to the city from a business, and time we got the cost of moving it and putting it back in, it was just as a cost, there was really no cost savings.
Okay.
So roll call, please.
Councilmember Montgomery,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Donnell,
Yes.
Councilmember DeWitt,
No.
Councilmember Sias,
Yay.
Councilmember Carlson,
No.
Councilmember Blease,
I'll change my thought and say yes.
Mayor Hop,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. Moving down to our next agenda item that was added, 7D. Discussion, take action if appropriate to approve the proposal from Rising Electric Incorporated in the amount of $821.13 for lighting for the new flagpole at City Hall.
Your Honor, I'd make a motion to approve that.
Okay, there's motion. There's support.
Support.
Okay. Further discussion regarding that.
One quick question for Craig. Is this something we need to put out for bids, or is this just something we could approve?
This is something we can just approve. It's under the threshold for, again, 2 quotes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion, comments, or questions?
Your Honor, I just want to make sure that they know this is for the new flagpole, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, the map they gave us was for William Ferry Park. So I just
No, that, I put that in there just for reference.
okay. All right,
Okay. Hearing nothing more, roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Donnell,
yes,
Councilmember DeWitt,
Yes.
Councilmember Sias,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlson,
Yes,
Councilmember Blease,
Yes,
Councilmember Montgomery,
Yes.
Mayor Hop,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. At this time is item 8, public comments. I see there's one attendee on an iPhone. Does the attendee on the iPhone wish to speak? To raise their hand?
Press *9.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll move down to item 9, report, city manager.
No report?
Okay, thank you. Moving on to council members. Councilmember Sias.
Yes, the Beautification Commission has decided to probably cancel the Carol Sing for this Christmas due to the COVID situation. But what we are planning in its place is a holiday decoration contest for homes around town. We're still kind of in the planning process, but there'll be prizes included, and just want to get the message out to the community that we're doing this. We can pick out, you can get applications, I believe, at City Hall. Is that right, Craig, for the contest?
Correct. They can register their address with City Hall.
Yep, yep. And that'll put your house in as an entry. So that's all mine.
Is it only residential or does it include businesses also?
We were talking about businesses. I don't know if we've come to a conclusion on that yet. Did we come to a conclusion on that, Craig? Do you remember? If we were going to do
both,
business?
yes.
We are going to do both? Okay, we're going to do both then. So, yeah.
Okay, because that's what was done in what, 2004 for a couple years?
Yeah.
And include businesses also? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Blease.
I just want to add a comment. I did have a few more residents that spoke with me to say they thanked me for not supporting cannabis business in the city of Ferrysburg this time. And a report.
Thank you. Councilmember Carlson. Councilmember Carlson.
no report.
Thank you. Councilmember Montgomery.
Yeah, the Parks and Recreation Commission met last week, reviewed the proposed site plan for the park around City Hall. We'll be bringing that as well as the Fire Barn Park proposals to council in November with a phase plan so we can discuss moving forward with those.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to seeing that. Councilmember DeWitt.
No report.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Donnell.
I'd like to congratulate Mayor Hop on her reappointment as vice president for the Michigan Association of Mayors.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to see on possible a work session or possible agenda item in the future, something dealing with the solicitors that we've had, especially at Leppings and the on the highway, getting to be kind of a nuisance with them out in the streets. End of report.
Okay, thank you. I only have a couple things. I'm still continuing to work with Ottawa County, the DEI department. We'll be attending a forum tomorrow. And then also an update to provide clarification. I know Mr. Bessinger put in our packet regarding the Smiths Bridge was unsuccessful in receiving any type of funding on this grant round. But to let people know that it involved 13 counties, 67 applicants for going towards a portion of the $4.8 million. and 17 bridges received some form of funding. Just to clarify it for the listening audience, that it wasn't one grant received the full $4.8 million. And with that, with the new OMA law that has just come through that we were discussing tonight at the beginning of the meeting, please, you are an elected official for the city, please become very familiarized with this new law as we move forward. So, end of report.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
So move. Have a great night, guys. Thank you very
Night.
much, Kevin
See ya.
and Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin and Andy.